Are you getting ready for your next event and you are in charge of putting together the production schedule? Or maybe you're working with an event producer and you just want to understand their process of how they build out the load-in, tech rehearsal, actual dress rehearsal, and then show days for your program. Well, this video is going to be for you if you are someone who is planning out anything that has to do with AV, production. Maybe you have a general session and some breakout rooms for your conference, or even if it's just a gala or a one-night event and you just need to understand why sometimes those things can take a day to set up or more. I'm going to walk you through my process as an event producer for how I work through my own production schedule for events everywhere, again, from a one-night event to a multi-week event. I'm going to have you covered. Before we jump into it, I'm Logan Clements. I'm a freelance event producer based in Seattle, Washington, but I execute events here and all over the world. I do want to remind you to like, subscribe, turn on that little notification bell so you get notified every single Monday when I drop new videos. I'm also the co-host of the Better Events podcast with fellow event pro Mary Davidson. And this year we are hosting the Better Events Conference on December 20th. It's virtual, so you can join us from anywhere. It's going to be a magical day where we're all going to learn and reset and recharge ahead of the new year so that 2024 can be the year that we all create better events. And you're going to walk away with some real world connections and people that you can work with, maybe bring you new business or partner with on future events. So we'll see you there. Well, I'm an event producer and I have made these production schedules many times or worked with someone who is making it themselves and provided feedback. So I'm going to call out the 3 things that I do when I'm building out a schedule or that I look for when I'm seeing a schedule that someone else built out to make sure that you don't forget some of these pro tips. I touched on this in my intro a little bit, but what is an on-site production schedule? So an on-site production schedule is going to be mainly with your production partner, your AV company, your AV vendor, or you if you're doing this all in-house. It's mainly the load-in, setup, rehearsal, and execution of any part of your show or your program. So your speakers, your breakouts, your general sessions. This is that schedule that you're going to use to understand just how long some things take. For starters, I always suggest that you work backwards. So you want to work backwards from your show days. So let's say you have a 3-day conference. It's happening Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So now you need to work backwards, knowing that Tuesday is your first day that you are going to be presenting to attendees. All your lights have to be on, mics working, everyone looks great, your speakers have rehearsed. And so you then start working backwards to understand how much rehearsal time do you need? And this depends. I'm not going to be able to give you a hard and true answer because it depends. If you have full days of programming, so from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., you're then going to have to get a little creative with your rehearsal time to make sure you give time for all of your speakers to rehearse. So then maybe you need 2 or 3 days before the program starts to fit in all of those rehearsals. And then before those rehearsals, you need to make sure that you've had time to tech check everything. And before you've had time to tech check everything, you need to make sure you've had time to load in everything. And as you know, if you work in events or have done a number of them, you know every venue is different. Some have a very convenient load-in system from the loading dock to the elevators to how to actually get into your space. And others are a little bit more inconvenient. This also matters and why you need to work closely with your production partner or your company or your technical director is to understand how long you need the equipment. When can the equipment get there? How long does it take to set up and be ready so that you can start tech checking and then you're ready for your full speaker-facing rehearsals? One of the common mistakes I see is that people don't leave enough time for this process, this kind of behind the scenes part. They factor in the show days, they factor in some time for rehearsal, and then they kind of forget everything else. And so here's where, as an event producer, I like to say I'm technical enough to be dangerous, but I am not a technical director. And a technical director is someone who actually oversees exactly what equipment's coming in, exactly what personnel will be there. They're the one that you can go to with questions about this cable, that cable, what's not working. That is the person you want to make sure gets some eyes on your production schedule before you finalize it, because they're going to be able to tell you, no, for rigging, for example, rigging of hanging lights and things from the ceiling, that takes a long time. And you got to probably buffer in some time for things to go wrong or not be ready when you're ready. So you need to make sure you talk to your technical director, but working backwards is so helpful. Another thing I find with clients is sometimes when I work backwards, I'll find out for sure exactly how many rehearsals they need. I've had some clients who really just want one rehearsal, 1 hour, all their speakers will come to it, and they'll just all rehearse together and do a very quick step through of their remarks, practice walking on and off the stage, practice with the microphone, kind of the lighting, what everything looks like. And then I had another client who wanted 2 rehearsals per session. and they had like 15 sessions. So that's 30 rehearsal slots we're trying to fit in. And so that's why that working backwards really helps you when you're building out that schedule and roughly kind of getting an idea for how long you need to be on site. Now, my second tip for building an on-site production schedule is to make sure you map out meal times and crew breaks based on union or non-union crew rules. So what I mean by this is that often your AV or your production company is going to be using some union workers. And those folks have very specific rules of how many hours they can work and then how long of a meal break they need, or they call it a coffee break. What's the difference between a provided meal versus a walk-away meal, and how much time that takes up. And so you need to start factoring that in just to understand. And I often have clients kind of push back a little bit sometimes of like, well, why do you need 3 breaks in this day? And you kind of lay it out that you're like, well, they're all humans and we need time. And just because your speakers are only coming in for an hour, they need to be cognizant that our crew has been there since 7 a.m. They've been there for 6 hours. And so that's why they need to have 30 minutes where we're giving them lunch, but they're going to get up and walk away from their desks, from their stations, and just have a break. Because you don't want a tired crew, you don't want a haggard crew, and a well-fed and well-rested crew is going to be a happy crew and give you a really great show. But just make sure if you're someone who doesn't work with unions a lot, I've had this happen a lot in Vegas, I often just have to keep myself honest to make sure that I'm not booking too much time with our team and not taking into account for those breaks. And then my last tip with creating your on-site production schedule is to make sure you track your hours against those that were scoped. And the big thing here is calling out any overtime that needs to happen. Because it is true, there are some days where it's just unavoidable that you're going to have a 12-hour day or a 16-hour day. And for most union crews or just most folks in general in the event industry, a normal day is 10 hours. And so when you get into overtime, it's not only a cost to your budget because you're going to have to pay for overtime, but it is also a people implication, and your crew and folks being tired and having too many 16-hour days in a row is just going to tire folks out and potentially put your show at risk because tired operators could lead to mistakes. And so just making sure you're tracking those. This is something that I see often happen if there wasn't a really specific production schedule created at the time of the scope of work was created. And then once you actually get in the nitty gritty, like that example I mentioned earlier of a client wanting 2 rehearsals for every speaker, all of a sudden these days are much longer than we thought. You need to call those out early. And whether that's you talking to the client directly or you talking to your project lead and they're calling it out, because there is, at the end of the day, sometimes it's just overtime has to happen to do everything that you're looking to do. I've also found a lot of times speakers don't like to fly in 2 days early for rehearsals. They want to rehearse the night before. But if 15 people want to rehearse the night before, it's not going to happen. Some people are going to have to be flexible, or they're just not going to get to rehearse. These are all the things you got to think about when you see that beautiful production schedule. Just know that there's often a lot more moving pieces, and I call it kind of like Tetris, to make it all work. If you're sitting there pulling your hair out and you want some help, feel free to reach out to me. This is something that I do love kind of going through. I love spreadsheets for folks who've worked with me before. And I'm always advocate for making sure that you have a happy, rested, and well-fed crew. Well, that brings me to the end of my video. I'm Logan Clements. I'm a freelance event producer based in Seattle, Washington, but I execute events here and all over the world. I do lots of videos all about event production, event management, Zoom, you name it. And I appreciate you watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.